Good morning. It's Monday morning, and if you're in Maryland, it's a snowy, icy, nasty Monday morning. I am praying and waiting and dreaming about spring. I hope you guys are too. If we all do it together, maybe it'll come quicker. We are ASMM Digital's Small Business Connections podcast. We are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our goal each and every week is to bring you information you can put to work in your business right away, in your business and in your life, because as an entrepreneur, those two things are go together. Yes, we want to have some sort of balance to our life, but the truth is, as entrepreneurs, everything we do affects our business, and our business affects everything we do. So we really do run together in those ways. I want to remind you that we are a small business running this podcast, and as such, we need your support. So please do subscribe over at YouTube. Even if you're not watching YouTube, subscribe. It'll help us out. And if you're listening to this, please subscribe wherever you are and take the time to leave a review wherever you are. It's really important. It will help us a lot. We are streaming live. That means you can ask questions and our guests can answer them. So leave a comment, I will see them, and we can ask our guests those questions. It also gives you an opportunity to tag your business. I say, this is your chance to shamelessly plug your business. Do it. Put your name and then say, I am with the name of your company, tag it, and people will see that. It's a good way to do it. I do want to tell you about our guest today. We have Kawan Glover from Overcome Adversity. I met Kawan, I guess, about 5 years ago, and I fell a little bit in love. He's the same age as my oldest son, and he's just an incredible person. But he has had so much adversity in his life. He has overcome so much, and he's the perfect person to talk about the subject of overcoming adversity in your life and living in a different way, not in victimhood, but in victory is what he said. So we're going to talk to him. I want him to tell the story though. Kawan, hi, how are you?
Good morning, and good morning to your community. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. I have been dying to have you on the show, so I'm really excited about having you on. How old are you again? Do you mind if I
Um,
ask?
of course, I'm now 27.
Yeah, almost exactly the same age as my son. He'll be 27 next month, actually.
Wow.
But tell people about your life, because you have a life that most 27-year-olds have not led. So tell them how you've come to start Overcome Adversity.
It starts, in high school when I was an athlete. I had good grades. I graduated number 6 in my class, 4.0. At the grades, I got into all the schools I wanted to, minus one. So when I got to university, I thought everything was going to continue along the same route, good grades. I would get everything I wanted. I would, in my mind, I was going to end up in somebody's penthouse suite working in some office. I ended up doing finance, and I thought I was going to be on Wall Street. Um, but that didn't happen. And I think my arrogance and my aloofness of what life actually does to people sometimes, I ended up with discovering a mass on my brain, and I didn't know what it was or why it was there, and the doctors weren't really sure. They called it a cavernous malformation. And I'm like, okay, fix it, take it out, do whatever you need to do. And, they told me to go home and monitor. So I did that, got worse. I started losing my vision, my balance. They did my first brain surgery on August 15, 2014. So I was at the time I was 20. So being 20, young and in college, I was like, forget this. I'm going to go right back to school. So within a week, I returned to school and to everything college kids do, partying, drinking, you name it, I did it. And within a month, I had a stroke. So on September 18th, 2014, I had a stroke.
At 20 years old.
20 years old.
That is scary. You know,
Absolutely.
I never asked this. Were you alone when it happened?
Uh, yeah, unfortunately, I was. I was in an apartment and I had a suite mate, but we weren't really close, so I was just going through it alone.
Wow. That's very scary. So all right, so you said a first stroke, which means that there were more.
Yeah, so I didn't have another major stroke. There may have been smaller instances, but I went on to have two more brain surgeries because the mass continued to grow back. One on October 1st, 2015, and another on October 12th, 2017.
And that was shortly after we met.
Yes.
I remember meeting you, and like I said, I fell a little in love, and I thought, oh my God, I love this young man. And then it was very shortly after that I got a call from Brent Simpson saying, "Have you heard about Kawan?" And we spent a lot of time together, terrified for you. So yeah, it was a scary time. So, but you've come a long way. So what have you done since that last surgery?
For the most difficult thing about experiencing trauma in that way is not being in the hospital. It's not going through the surgery. It's the in between recovery period. So the depressions and anxiety and suicidal ideations, those things that I experienced as a result of my reality not meeting my expectations, I had to find a way to uh, deal with that. I could no longer avoid the situation. I could no longer push it away. So in 2017, when I got out that last surgery, I spent that year recovering in physical rehab, dealing with the medical debt, which was ended up being 1.2 million after brain surgery. So I was just like, I don't even know how I'm going to deal with that. But then I got on Facebook, much like we are here today, and got on live, and I just started talking. And I knew that somehow, some part of me knew that sharing my story with others would give them a sense of hope and encouragement. Then I went on to start my company, and I went on to write a book, and now I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I want to talk about, and I hope you don't mind, we didn't talk about whether you would talk about this or not, but you have a stroke, and it's not that life just goes back to normal. You have a stroke, and things change. You had your last surgery, and things change. So, what are some of the effects that still linger?
Yeah, so when I was 20, I was completely able bodied. There was no physical damage anywhere on my body. But now, as a result of this last surgery, I have a lot of right side deficit. I want to say I'm operating about 60% physical capacity. Um, I have a condition called aphasia. So if you see me swallowing a lot, it's because there's a lot of spit that just swarms in my
Mm-hmm.
mouth out of nowhere. There's numbness on this side of my face, so I don't even feel this at all. Um, but in spite of all those things, it's given me a whole new perspective and a whole new outlook on life. Um, just grateful to be alive and be able to have these conversations, be able to share my story and empower others. There are things that had happened that I do wish hadn't happened, but they did, and now I'm going to use those to better the lives of others.
Awesome. We're gonna talk about victory over victimhood, but before we do, I'm gonna put something in here, and I'm sure you will agree with me. We hear a lot from people because we run Burgers and Bands for suicide prevention. We hear a lot from people who are going through a hard time, and they'll say, "Well, but Kawan had it so much worse," or "But my neighbor has cancer; she has it so much worse," or "My neighbor's been out of work since last March. They have it so much worse." And I want to say, as we're talking about this, that as you inspire me every day, but I allow myself, if something is tough for me, if I'm having a down time, to say, "I'm having a hard time and I need help," or "I'm having a hard time and I've got to work my way through this." You've got to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and not compare yourself to what somebody else is going through, because their pain being worse doesn't make yours any less, right? So
Yeah,
I want to make sure people know that part.
I'm no longer in the I no longer have the interest, or I'm no longer interested in comparing people's traumas. Everybody's experiences things differently, and because you feel like you can handle my trauma, I probably cannot handle yours, whatever that may be. You were built for the fight you meant to fight, and that's just it. I'm no longer interested in uh, mine is worse than yours, or yours is worse than mine, because that does nothing for you in that moment.
Absolutely. And I want to remind that, because we were just talking ahead of time that there were several suicides in PG County last week or the week before. And then Severna Park had another suicide last week. People are struggling. If you are struggling, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to say, even some people are struggling. And the truth is, they look at their life and they're like, "I've got wonderful kids. I have a wonderful husband. I have a wonderful life. Why am I struggling?" You are. It doesn't matter why. So if you need help, please do reach out. I want to remind everybody of that as we're getting to talk about this, because a lot of what we're going to talk about is overcome an adversity, but also sometimes you need help. So please do ask for it if you need it. So let's talk a little bit about victory over victimhood, because I think this is a really important subject. I think it's a really important thing to talk about. So tell me what you mean when you say victory over victimhood.
Um, it's kind of intuitive, but when someone is a victim, something happened to them, and then they use that as a tool or a resource or an excuse to that nothing else will work because of that one thing. My marriage didn't work, so I didn't get that job, so that's the reason why I'm in this place. Or my business failed, so that's the reason why I'm in this place. And then they go to a place where all the other victims find themselves in a community. And then instead of a neighborhood, I call them victimhood. That's when you start buying property and real estate in that victimhood mentality and use that one instance or those couple of instances as a basis for the rest of your life. They are the reason for everything else that happens in your life. So now you're living in victimhood and you're perpetuating that cycle of thoughts and actions over and over again. Uh, they say that Les Brown said this once: the difference between rich and poor is you're buying permanent residence in that what a poor mindset. But being broke, it's just you're passing through, and it's okay to be a victim of something that actually happened. But give yourself time to understand that. Understand that also you're just passing through. Use that victimhood, turn it into victory. If you look at the letter V, for example, and victory, it looks like a mountain, and in
Mm-hmm.
between that mountain is a valley, and at the bottom of that mountain, there's a point that you be. It's called rock bottom. I call it the bottom of the V, where it's not your fault that you fall into this place. It's not that your fault that you got to this deep dark depths of despair, but it is your responsibility to decide. Hey, you know what? My marriage did fail, but I'm gonna find another partner. You know what? My business did fail, but I'm gonna start over and get back up to a place where it's profitable again. It is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Exactly. It's funny you said that, and I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I say that a lot. I say, depression is not your fault. It happens, but you're the only one that's going to get yourself out of it. You're the only one that has the power to say, okay, these are the steps I have to take to get myself out of it. And once you realize that, it's actually freeing. Actually, realizing that, hey, I'm responsible for this. I can call the doctors. I can work with my coping skills. I can do something to take a next step. So I think no matter what it is, whether it's depression or divorce, or I have a friend who was sexually assaulted, and she has gone on to do absolutely amazing things for not just victims of sexual assault, but people who have dealt with PTSD and people who have dealt with all sorts of other things. That she's done amazing things. And as we were talking, I was thinking about Terry Fox. Do you know Terry Fox? Was he he was before your time?
Yeah, before that.
So Terry Fox had cancer, young guy, and I can't remember. He's Canadian. He had cancer, and he had to have his leg amputated. And it was after that he decided to start running to raise money for cancer. And that's amazing. I mean, he could have said, well, I had my leg amputated and I'm dying of cancer. And so what do I have to do? Poor me. But instead, he was like, no, I'm going to take that and then I'm going to build something. And they've wrote movies about him, books about him. He's got, all of Canada knows about him. He was an absolutely amazing person. But that's because he took victory over victimhood. So I think it's so important to think about. I want to talk about why. And what's your why personally, but why it's important to know what that is.
My why, the reason I get up every day, the reason I do what I do, and I say what I say, and I feel what I feel, is simply because I know now that, a lot of people say when they're in that victimhood mentality, uh, oh, why me? This isn't fair. And then my thought now is like, well, why not you? And if not you, then who would you wish this upon? And I think they fall into the trap of those cycle of thoughts. So when I get up in the morning, knowing that this happened to me, it lets me know that I can prevent this from happening to someone else. I've been through the muck. I've been in the darkness. I've been wrapped in a warm embrace of despair. And that gives me the tools, strategies, and understanding that, hey, again, these things happen. Life just happens to people. It's not your fault, but knowing that my story can give somebody the gumption, to the motivation, the inspiration to go out there and use that adversity as a strength, use it as power, use it as inspiration for somebody else, and they can continue to pass it on. So my why is my story can change somebody's life, and that's why I get up every day.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to know your why. And I want to say, I think a lot of people, this is something we talk about, knowing your why. We talk about it a lot. But really, what we're talking about is purpose in life, right? What is your purpose in life? Why are you here? What are you accomplishing? And I think I found my purpose in life through Burgers and Bands for Suicide Prevention. Yes, I own ASMM Digital Marketing, and I love what I do. I tell people I have a passion for marketing, but my purpose in life is suicide prevention. And knowing that every day changes the way I talk to people. It changes the way I think. It changes the way I parent. Changes everything. So knowing your why and having that purpose is so huge. So it's pretty amazing at 27 that you have your why.
Yeah,
It really is.
I would say this whole event, this whole ordeal was the biggest gift in my life I've ever been given. And it's important to know why, because when things get challenging, when things get difficult, when you're faced with adversity in something that you're doing or trying to pursue, if you have no why, the bottom falls from under you. And you feel no reason to continue to pursue something that's difficult, that makes you uncomfortable, that takes you out of your comfort zone. The why is that foundation that allows you to keep pushing forward no matter how difficult something is.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about protecting your mental health. And I want to talk about it on two levels: why it's important to you, but what are some of the things you do to protect your mental health?
It's important to me because without your mental acuity, without your mental stability, nothing else you do will make much sense or have any real impact. I think your mental health is paramount because even with the wrong mental health, you can go and lift weights the wrong way, your physical health is thrown off, and then stress. The reason I am here now before you today and your audience, stress. Stress can literally kill you, and that's a part of your mental health. So I have a very personal relationship with understanding why mental health is important, and I just think it really sets the foundation for your overall health and well-being, your emotional sanity, your mental stability, your physical well-being, all those things tying together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Everything you think about, your relationships, the way you run your business, the way you drive your car. Oh, that's a really good thing. I just thought of it as I was saying it. The way you drive your car. When I went through my depression, I was terrifying on the road because I didn't care anymore. I was terrifying. I drove too fast. I drove irresponsibly. I screamed at other drivers. I was terrifying. So, everything, your mental health affects everything you do. It really is important. So, what are some of the things you do to protect your mental health?
Well, I know that we're in a space in life right now with this pandemic that you're always flooded with different types of news. And one of the things I do is I don't touch my phone for at least the first 30 minutes of the day. I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of grounding exercises. What can I see, smell, hear, touch, feel? Um, and I also practice gratitude. I'm really big on serotonin. 90% of that is produced in your stomach. So, curating what you eat on a regular basis, I think that helps as well. Also, I turn my notifications off on all my social media for most of the day. That information overload, that extra stimuli is not necessary, and I don't find myself in a lot of conflict. I look for conflict resolution as quickly and efficiently as possible. But just getting to know myself, spending a lot of time in silence thinking, and measuring how much of outside input. I do a lot of reading. As you can see here, I read about 10 books so far this year. So I spend a lot of time with myself, just really pouring into myself because even with what I have done and what I've accomplished, I can't continue to pour into other people with an empty cup. So pouring back into myself is really important.
Right, absolutely. So we just got a comment from Lindy Caruso. She says gratitude is great, and it is so important. It's such an important part of everything that we do, that we're grateful. So I think one thing that you didn't mention, and is really important to me, is sleep. I think sleep is something that we too often, what people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah,
That's a horrible attitude.
and the reason I didn't mention that is because sleep is actually one of the things I struggle with. So I often don't talk about it unless I have to. But uh, complete transparency, I find myself going to bed and I'll get up around 3 or 4 in the morning and just kind of lay there like I should be going
Now
back to
what?
sleep. And then my
Right.
mind is like, well, you should get started for the day. That things you can accomplish. And also, after the surgery, my bladder started having a mind of its own. So sometimes that can be distracting. But sleep is very important. I think when you're well rested, you give your mind some time to really decompress and get through all the garbage that's in your mind and kind of flush that out. Staying hydrated, things of that nature. Those all things. Have some plants around you. But sleep and sun are really, really important. Really,
Those are
really
my
important.
two biggest things. So sleep, as often as I can. So I'm losing my mind right now because I did have back surgery. So, and it's icy outside, so I can't go out and walk because I'm afraid of falling. So I've been walking on my treadmill and not getting my sunshine. But my sleep, I protect to a degree that almost borders on obsession. I know what time I'm going to bed. I use white noise. I have blackout shades. People know, don't wake, once mom is going upstairs to sleep, unless the house is on fire, don't wake her up, because I will be exactly like what you said. I'll wake up and then I'm up. So I am obsessed with my sleep because I think it's that important. But I liked something else you said too, and nobody ever says it, which is hydration. Your brain needs water. And actually, to me, I think of it as a sponge. And this is probably not at all how it physically works, but I think of it as a sponge. And if you can keep it well hydrated, it's going to work better for you. So I think it's really, really important. I want you to talk about, you've got a book behind you. You wrote Favor. Talk about that process. And was it stressful? How did it work for you? And why did you feel it was important to write it?
I want to say I started writing the book on July 13th at 6:58 a.m. and I didn't publish it until September 4th, 2020, and that was back in 2018. But writing the process is a memoir about my whole experience. So not just writing the book, but actually getting to that first draft was like an accomplishment for me because I had to relive and rewrite and re-experience those traumatic moments, those surgeries, those suicidal thoughts, the depression, the recovery, and having to relive that and rewrite it. So I cried and boo-hooed all the way to the end of that first draft. And then it became more about the process of writing a book. When I sent the project to an editor, she was just like, "What is this? Like, this looks like you wrote a straight biography." And to be quite honest, no one knows who you are. So this has no real relevance in the marketplace. And she said, you know, take it back and rewrite it. So I did, and then it started to come to fruition. So it was a interesting, involved process, but I'm glad I went through it, and now I know what it takes to write a book.
Who did you take it to? Do you mind if I ask?
Yes, her name. Wow, it just escaped me. She's an editor I found in Australia, and she actually left a review on the book. But I also took it to she works closely with Brent, Shanice, and she was just like, "Yeah, the first 12 chapters are boring. Please, like, work on this." So when I got that advice, I took it back and found a way to rewrite it.
I love people who are honest. Anastasia hates it when I say this, but if you have an ugly baby, I'm not going to tell you it's cute. And I tell you that because I love babies. So the fact that I'm not going to lie to you about a baby says a lot about who I am. But I think it's important that we're honest with people about things, because had they said, "Oh, this is a great book," and then you publish it and you put it out there, and it's not accomplishing what you want it to accomplish, that doesn't do you any good. So I love that you not only received honest feedback, but you accepted it and took it back and put it to work for you. I think that's important. That is an important part of growth in general, right?
Absolutely. I think, like you said, if I published what I first wrote and put that out in the marketplace, I think I would have a lot of calls like, what did you write here? What is this about? I don't understand what this doesn't hit home for me at all. So I took
Right.
it back and looked at some popular YouTube videos, some popular movies, and I took that framework and put it into a literary style that made sense to me and allowed the reader to relate to the content.
Absolutely. And that's the trick in writing, I think, is to make sure first of all you're talking to a specific person and you're giving them, because not everybody is going to have, most people won't have the experience you've had, no matter what the experience is, whether it's what you've gone through, whether it's my life, whether it's my neighbor's life. We've all lived something different, but we can all relate to each other in a different way if we frame it right. So it's wonderful what you've done. I really like that. So tell me, this can't be easy. When you wake up in the morning and you realize I can't do the things that there are, I'm limited by some of the things that I can do, or this isn't the life I thought I was going to lead. There have to still be those down moments. So when you wake up in the morning and you're having one of those down times, how do you work through it and realize, okay, I'm going to keep going?
I think, well, first, I allow myself to feel those feelings, understanding that there's nothing wrong or inhuman about those things. But also, I don't give myself too much time. You got a minute max to feel what you feel and, go through all the emotions. But also, understanding that this is bigger than me. Like, I didn't go through this just to go through this. And, like, people may not always call me and say, oh, you're so amazing anymore, but they're watching. And if they're
Right.
going through their own adversity, their own trauma, I think it's important to let them know, hey, I have down days, yet I feel bad. Yes, I wish my life were different sometimes, but it's not. And understanding that there's something more to this. And I show that every day in how I show up and how I present myself to the world. Also, knowing that I'm doing this to show my sister. I think she's one of my biggest motivating factors to show her that, when life gets hard, you know, uh, you get lemons. I make the most 5-star lemonade you can think of, and I continue to do it every day. So letting others be the reason, because if you're depending on yourself, that's going to run out. But when you rely on the motivation and inspiration from others, knowing that it's bigger than you, that's what keeps me going.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that's, we've all got to look at those things. Somebody said to me, I guess last week, they said, you survived everything so far. You've survived all the bad days so far. You're going to survive. So get through today. Tomorrow will come and it will be another better day, right? And I think it sounds trite, but the truth is, if you look back at some of the things we've survived, right? You've survived a lot. So you'll survive today and we'll get through tomorrow, and then you'll have another day where you think, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe my life is this good." Because those days come.
And that's where perspective comes in. I talk a lot about perseverance, patience, and perspective. Perspective is one of the most powerful things in the world, because you may have broken your leg yesterday, um, and not sure if you're ever going to walk again. But like today, right now in this moment, you took a step forward. You got up today. You're
Right.
breathing today when you thought you were going to die yesterday. So I think that understanding that progression and understanding and allowing yourself to feel that, understand that perspective. I call it self empathy. Perspective is self empathy, allowing you to understand the progress you made from yesterday and today, and remaining present, because a lot of times we live in past, which is a memory, and a lot of times we spend in the future, which is your imagination. Those two things don't exist. Right now is all that matters. So allowing yourself to uh, give give oneself grace and understanding that you were here yesterday, but you're here today, and that's all that
Right.
really matters.
So, exactly. Absolutely. All right. Let's talk about, if you were going to give a commencement speech. You think about Steve Jobs, and he gave the connecting the dots commencement speech. And if you were to give a commencement speech and you just could give one life lesson to the college students sitting, graduates sitting in front of you, what would that life lesson be?
This is something I say whenever I share my story, whenever I talk to someone. And it's similar to something you said before we got on. The darkest night always comes before the brightest morning, and your morning is coming, and that revolves generally around gratitude. Like times get hard, but in between those two mountains, the V of victory, there's a valley, and the only time you receive the vision, the plan, or whatever you want to call it for the victory is in that valley. Darkest moments are when the light shines the brightest. So understand there is a reason, there is a purpose, there is a mission you are meant to understand in those deep, dark crevices of you feel like the worst thing has ever happened to me, the worst part of your life. There is a reason, there is a purpose for you to have understand. Like what it's not about what's happening, it's about what you have learned from that. When your business failed, you learn how not to give your books. When your marriage failed, you learn not how not to communicate. Those are things, those are there's always a lesson in everything. There are wins and lessons. There are no losses. Because if you look at all the most successful people, they have essentially failed their way to success. So I would say to all those listening at that college ceremony and all those listening right now, the darkness that you're feeling is meant to shield all the outside stimuli to make you focus on this moment because the light that shines brightly on you when all this is over is going to illuminate you and bring you to your greatest purpose to allow you to get out of victimhood and achieve the ultimate victory in your life.
That is so true, and everything, and I'm much older, so I've had a lot of
You
valleys.
sure? I thought you was
I
25.
right, but I've had a lot of valleys, and almost every time I've looked back, and I say almost because I am very honest with the fact that Ethan's depression for me, every time I have learned something, right? And I even with Ethan's depression and I've said I would not change a thing. The only thing in my life I would change is if I could go back and keep my child from having depression. That was the hardest moment, hardest thing in my life, and I would not wish it on him again for anything. But my own depression, my mom's cancer, my horrible my abusive childhood, all of it, I learned something and I came through it in a way that was better for that experience. And I think that if we can keep that in mind, that one day we're going to look back on this lesson and think, yeah, I needed that. That's how I got here. Right?
I believe it's
So,
true. It's
yeah,
absolutely true.
absolutely. All right. I want to talk about favorite books, but I chose your first favorite for you, which is Favor, because it's your book. So tell us, you talked about it earlier. Where can people buy Favor?
It's exclusively on Amazon. It's available in any English speaking country. Um, and it's also if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's available there as well.
Oh, good. Oh, that's good to know. And I love Kindle Unlimited. So that's wonderful. All right, let's talk about the other one because I love that you picked a fiction book. Everybody's like, I'm going to pick a business book, but this one you said Frankenstein has always been your favorite. So tell me why.
Um, it's really about the monster. Like I remember reading that story and like sweating and like the hairs on the back of my neck standing up and just being able to empathize with the character that wasn't. It really wasn't his fault that he was created, but it was
Right.
his responsibility to find out his purpose. And that kind of relates back to my core message. And I didn't realize that until just at this moment that was the reason it stuck with me so well. And I remember not being able to put the book down and just being able to really see the character, understanding his plight. And sometimes we do feel like Frankenstein's monster. We feel
Right.
misunderstood and unheard and unseen. And then when we do show up, we take up a lot of room, and people don't exactly always relate to us. But I think understanding that there's a reason or purpose for your journey and different adversities you will face, but as long as you come out on the other side, having learned the lesson for you, the reason of your existence, I think that's what life is ultimately about.
I love that, and I'm a huge fan of fiction. I read it all the time. I told you before this, I have read The Count of Monte Cristo 6 times, and I have listened to it multiple times. And I go back and read my favorite sections often because I just love the book so much. So I think, yes, I'm a huge fan of reading, and especially books that will move you forward. But fiction is also often moves you forward, and for exactly the reason you said. I think it often moves you forward. I'm going to shamelessly plug something, if you don't mind, here, because I think it's kind of interesting to me right now. So after this show, let me put it up here, I'm going to be doing a Clubhouse talk on this book, The One Thing. And I'm doing it with Cheryl Cage. We're going to start doing talks at 10:55 on Monday mornings. We're going to pick a book. So this is the first one, and we're going chapter by chapter through it. We're going to have a discussion. You can join in the discussion, talk about how it relates to your life. It's a great, if you're not on Clubhouse and you want to invite, ask me. I've got it. If you don't have an iPhone, I'm sorry, go buy one, because that's the only way you can get on Clubhouse. But I think it's going to be interesting because it gives you a chance to really dig deep into these books. So please do come over and see us on Clubhouse for that. Kawan, here's how they find you. They find you at www.kawanglover.com. And then you're on social media. How do they find you on social media?
So if the only one I'm not really active on is TikTok, but if you want to find me on social media, literally search Kawan Glover on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. On Twitter, so _ between Kawan and Glover. I'm on Clubhouse, so I'll be at the talk today with Ann. And,
Awesome.
If you want to get me directly, email me at info@kawanglover.com. But otherwise, just Google my name, and I'm sure I'll pop up somewhere.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have an unusual name. Everybody and their sister is named Ann Brennan, especially if they're Catholic. It's a very Catholic name, Ann Brennan. So it's nice to have one. Kawan Glover is a nice name to have. All right, I want to remind everybody here, we do have another show next week. We have Tatiana. I'm going to say her name wrong. I'm going to say Swar. Hopefully that's right. And she's going to talk about visionaries. She's going to talk about having a visionary life and how to take your vision and turn it into something. So I'm interested in hearing what she has to say. I also want to remind you to subscribe. It helps us a lot. I'm going to create this evening, hopefully, a Patreon for us, because we really want to grow this. We feel like what we're creating here, you just heard the conversation with Kawan, what we're growing here is special. We're growing something that you can learn from, that you can take and put into work. And we're not going to lie to you. I'm never going to sit here and say, oh, you're going to make $1 million this year. Chances are you aren't. But if you work hard, you might get the things you want in life, right? You might. That just reminded me of a cute story about my son, my 27-year-old, actually. He used to sing, "You Can't Always Get What You Want." And I think if you try sometimes, you'll get what you need, that song. But he had the lyrics all wrong. And he said, but if you try sometime, you just might find you get something to eat. So maybe you'll find you get something to eat if you do the things that we tell you to do on this show, actually. All right, Kawan, it has been absolutely lovely having you. I knew it would be. I have, like I said, I fell in love with you 5 years ago, and I just am so glad you were on here today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be before you and some of your audience. And I hope somebody gained some value today. And remember that the darkest night always comes before the brightest morning. And your morning is coming.
Thank you so much, Kawan. All right, everybody. Kawan, you stick around. Everybody else, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.